"Get out of my way, nurse, you're overstepping." Dr. Elias Thorne's voice sliced through the midnight ER, dismissing Nurse Kaelen Reed's urgent assessment. A critical patient's life hung precariously in the balance. What happens when arrogance trumps life-saving insight? It was late night in the emergency department of St. Jude's Hospital, a sprawling, under-resourced urban facility. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting a harsh glow over worn linoleum floors and the relentless pulse of monitors. The air, thick with the scent of disinfectant and desperation, hummed with the constant, chaotic energy of a hospital perpetually teetering on the edge. Amidst the rush, Nurse Kaelen Reed moved with a quiet, almost imperceptible efficiency, her navy scrubs blending with the tapestry of exhausted staff. At 32, Kaelen carried herself with a calm assurance that belied her years, an unshakable presence in a storm. A gurney carrying a panicked patient with a lacerated arm sped past her. "Elevate the limb. Apply direct pressure." Kaelen instructed the flustered intern, her voice steady. "Ben, grab a trauma kit from Bay 2, Stat." Nurse Ben Carter, a younger colleague, nodded, watching her focused movements with a mix of respect and awe. Kalen's hands moved with practiced precision, her eyes missing nothing. Most saw just another competent nurse, but Kaelen Reed was far more than her scrubs implied. Years ago, she traded desert camouflage for hospital blues. The narrator reveals her past in the Army. She'd spent 2 tours in the most dangerous corners of the world as a decorated combat medic, making split-second life-or-death decisions in dusty, makeshift field hospitals, where resources were scarce and every second counted. Those experiences had etched a deep, unwavering resolve into her very core. Back in the present, Kaelen often found herself in the quiet solitude of the break room, sipping lukewarm coffee. She chose St. Jude's precisely for its raw reality, its relentless demands. The gleaming, well-funded hospitals felt sterile, disconnected. Here, in the heart of the city's struggle, she saw the humanity, the urgent, undeniable need. The faint, jagged scar just above her left wrist, a relic from a mortar blast, throbbed faintly. A silent reminder of every life she'd fought for, a testament to her enduring mission. As the morning's shift change approached, Kaelen completed her handover with the same meticulous efficiency she applied to patient care. "Mr. Henderson in Bay 4 is stable, but keep an eye on his glucose levels," she told Nurse Jessica Chen, her voice clear despite the din. Jessica, a seasoned veteran, simply nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. "You always leave everything so neat, Kaelen," Jessica commented, a hint of admiration in her tone. "It's a gift." Kaelen offered a small, knowing smile. "Just the daily grind." Meanwhile, in the polished, if slightly dated, main lobby of St. Jude's, an unexpected guest made a grand entrance. Dr. Elias Thorne, a renowned trauma surgeon from a prestigious downtown hospital, swept through the double doors, impeccably dressed. The hospital administrator, Mrs. Albright, practically scurried to greet him, fawning over his celebrity status. "Dr. Thorne, a true honor to have you here for this consultation," she gushed, her voice dripping with deference. Thorne offered a curt nod, his gaze already sweeping the utilitarian surroundings with thinly veiled disdain. Later, in a private consultation room that felt far too cramped for his expansive ego, Thorne reviewed patient files. He internally expressed his annoyance at being at St. Jude's, a place he considered beneath his considerable talents. "Another pro bono waste of my time," he muttered, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. He reviewed the charts with a critical, almost superior attitude, his mind already formulating a diagnosis he believed no one else in this lesser institution would have considered. His white coat, embroidered with "Dr. Elias Thorne, Chief of Trauma," felt like armor. A new patient, a hidden danger. "Can anyone save him?" The double doors of St. Jude's ER entrance burst open, an alarm blaring as paramedics rushed to stretch her through. "Male, 67, Mr. Silas Green. Unresponsive, acute-onset severe abdominal pain, rapidly deteriorating vitals," one paramedic shouted, his voice strained with urgency. Kaelen Reed, already at the triage desk, moved with a practiced, fluid grace. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, immediately locked onto the patient. She saw more than just the reported symptoms. A subtle, almost imperceptible tremor in his left arm, the unusual pallor, the shallow, rapid breathing that didn't quite match the reported pain. This wasn't a routine emergency. This was something rare, something swift and profoundly dangerous. Her diagnosis is radical, but is it right? Inside Trauma Bay 3, the chaos coalesced into focused action. Kaelen was already barking orders, her voice calm but firm, as she ran her hands over Mr. Green, feeling for subtle clues. Get a stat abdominal ultrasound and prep for immediate chest x-ray, but focus on the aortic arch. She instructed Dr. Lena Miller, a bright but relatively inexperienced ER resident. Miller, initially impressed by Kaelen's speed, hesitated. Aortic arch. Nurse Reed, his pain is clearly abdominal. We're thinking mesenteric ischemia or perforated ulcer. Kaelen met her gaze, a flicker of confident urgency in her eyes. Dr. Miller, his presentation is atypical for those. Trust me, I've seen this pattern before, albeit in very different circumstances. We don't have time for a differential that doesn't include the rarest, most lethal possibility. Hospital rules versus a patient's life. What will win? Dr. Miller bit her lip, caught between Kaelen's undeniable insight and the rigid protocols of St. Jude's. I understand your concern, Nurse Reed, and I respect your assessment, but for an aortic dissection, especially without clear cardiac symptoms, I need senior physician approval to order those scans. It's unconventional for a primary abdominal complaint. The patient's breathing grew shallower, the monitor beeping with an increasingly alarming rhythm. Kaelen's voice dropped, laced with a quiet intensity. Dr. Miller, with this kind of rapid decline, we won't have time to wait for approval if we're wrong. Every second is costing him. This isn't just an abdominal complaint anymore. It's systemic. Miller glanced nervously towards the bay doors, knowing Kaelen was right, but fearing the wrath of an attending. The expert arrives, completely unaware of the true expert. At that very moment, a distinguished figure strode down the ER corridor, flanked by a fawning hospital administrator. Dr. Elias Thorne, impeccable in his starched white coat, emanated an aura of self-importance that seemed entirely out of place in the gritty, utilitarian halls of St. Jude's. He was here for a special consultation, a favor to the board, and he made no secret of his disdain for the lesser hospital's chaotic environment. As he passed Trauma Bay 3, the muffled urgency caught his ear. He spared a dismissive glance at the frantic activity within. Typical ER chaos, he muttered to the administrator, a subtle sneer playing on his lips. Always a spectacle. One hopes they manage to stabilize things before I'm needed for anything truly complex. He remained blissfully ignorant of the true expertise already at work. The moment of truth. Will the expert listen? Just as Thorne's entourage moved past, Dr. Miller's voice, tinged with desperation, cut through the din. I need a senior attending now. Patient's crashing. Thorne paused, a dramatic flair to his turn. The administrator, eager to impress, quickly ushered him forward. Dr. Thorne, perhaps you could offer your expertise? It seems a critical case. Thorne's chest puffed out slightly. He took a confident, almost regal stride into Trauma Bay 3, his presence immediately dominating the space. Kaelen, her back to the door, was focused intensely on Mr. Green, a faint flicker of concern crossing her face as she sensed the new arrival. She knew Thorne's reputation. The renowned surgeon makes a critical mistake. Dr. Elias Thorne approached the patient with an air of practiced authority. He ignored Kaelen's precise observations and Miller's hesitant attempts to brief him on Kaelen's unconventional diagnosis. Instead, he performed a cursory examination, his fingers tapping confidently, his eyes scanning only the most obvious vital signs. Right, classic presentation, he declared, pulling a penlight from his pocket. Severe abdominal pain, dropping pressure, likely a ruptured diverticulum, or perhaps a gastric bleed. Let's get him prepped for a scope and start him on broad-spectrum antibiotics. He spoke with an air of absolute certainty, his pronouncements echoing in the bay. Kaelen's jaw tightened. The patient's vitals, ignored by Thorne, continued their alarming descent, the subtle signs she'd observed growing more pronounced. She tried to warn him. He refused to listen. Kaelen, Her voice, a low, steady counterpoint to Thorne's booming confidence, finally interjected. "Dr. Thorne, with respect, the patient's neurological deficits, particularly the transient left-sided weakness and the unequal pulses we're observing, suggest something more acute. I believe we need to rule out an aortic dissection immediately." Thorne stopped, his hand mid-air, a look of incredulity on his face. He turned slowly, his gaze dismissive. "Nurse, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but let's stick to what we know. Anecdotal observations are not diagnoses. Your role is to assist, not to speculate on complex surgical conditions. This is clearly a GI issue." Dr. Miller shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. The surgeon's ego puts a patient's life in jeopardy. Thorne, clearly annoyed by Kaelen's persistence, stepped closer, his voice dropping to a condescending murmur that still carried across the bay. "Let me explain something, nurse. I have been practicing medicine for decades. I have performed hundreds of complex surgeries. You take vital signs, you administer medication, you follow orders. You do not diagnose, and you certainly do not tell a surgeon of my caliber what to rule out." He gestured imperiously to Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller, prep for the scope as instructed. Nurse Reed, please ensure the patient's charting is up to date and focus on your duties. Kaelen's jaw clenched, her eyes fixed on the rapidly worsening patient. Thorne's ego was now a direct threat to Mr. Green's life. She lays out the facts. He calls it insubordination. Nurse Kaelen Reed stepped closer to the patient, her voice calm but firm, a stark contrast to the frantic beeping of the monitors. "Dr. Thorne, with all due respect, the patient's capnography readings are dropping, and his breath sounds are diminishing rapidly, not improving. This isn't a simple allergic reaction. The asymmetrical chest rise, coupled with the sudden hypotension, points to a tension pneumothorax, not just bronchial spasm." She held up a tablet, pointing to a specific, critical reading. Dr. Thorne, already impatient, crossed his arms tighter, his jaw visibly clenching. He saw not a colleague offering crucial insight, but an insubordinate nurse challenging his authority. He publicly shames her, but her resolve only grows stronger. "Nurse Reed, I believe I made myself clear," Thorne boomed, his voice carrying beyond Trauma Bay 3 into the bustling ER corridor. Several heads turned, including Nurse Ben Carter, who flinched, and Dr. Miller, who stared at the floor. "Your observations are noted, but your diagnosis is not required. There's a chain of command in this hospital, and frankly, your persistent overstepping is unprofessional. We don't need nurses second-guessing the attending physician, especially one with my experience. Now, I suggest you return to your duties and allow those with actual medical degrees to manage this case." Kaelen's face remained composed, but a flicker of controlled anger tightened her jaw. She begs him to save a life. His ego refuses. Kaelen ignored Thorne's public reprimand, her gaze fixed on the rapidly deteriorating patient. "Dr. Thorne!" she pleaded, her voice dropping to an urgent, almost desperate whisper. "His oxygen saturation is now below 85. He's going to code. If we don't decompress this immediately, Mr. Green will die. This isn't about my opinion versus yours. It's about a life that's slipping away right now." Thorne scoffed, turning his back slightly, dismissing her plea as emotional dramatics. "I've seen plenty of patients in distress, nurse. Your panic is unhelpful. He just needs a higher dose of epinephrine." The patient monitors, however, began to shriek faster, a chilling, undeniable warning. The chief of medicine is watching. What will she do? Unbeknownst to Thorne, a figure of quiet authority had paused at the ER observation area, drawn by his raised voice. Dr. Evelyn Hayes, the chief of medicine, was on her evening rounds. She stopped, her stern face etched with concern, as she watched the unfolding drama through the glass of Trauma Bay 3. Nurse Ben Carter, passing by, caught her eye. He subtly tilted his head toward the bay, a worried glance confirming the tension within. Dr. Hayes's gaze sharpened, her expression hardening as Thorne's condescending tone became audible, even through the muted glass. She decided to stay, her presence a silent, growing judgment. He just made his biggest mistake. She's about to prove it. Thorne spun back to Kaelen, his face flushed with anger. "Listen here, Nurse Reed," he spat, jabbing a finger towards her. "I'm giving you a direct order. Back off, or I'll have you suspended for insubordination. Your intuition, or whatever you call it, is disrupting proper medical procedure. I don't know what kind of assumptions you're making, but your limited experience as an ER nurse doesn't qualify you to contradict a senior surgeon. Kaelen's eyes narrowed, a subtle shake of her head indicating her silent, unyielding decision. He had crossed a line, and she knew exactly what she had to do next. She won't back down. Not when a life is on the line. Kaelen held Thorne's furious gaze, her own eyes unwavering, radiating a steely resolve that belied her calm demeanor. "Doctor," she stated, her voice quiet but piercing, "are you truly going to let your assumptions about who I am prevent you from providing the best care for this patient? Is your ego so fragile that it overrides the clear signs of a life-threatening condition?" Thorne sputtered, his face flushing a deeper crimson. "My ego? This is about procedure. About respect for medical authority," he stammered, unable to form a coherent defense against her moral challenge. Outside, Dr. Hayes watched, her expression grim, intently observing Thorne's unraveling. He went too far. Now she'll show him. "Assumptions?" Thorne sneered, his voice dripping with contempt as he turned his back on Kaelen, gesturing dismissively towards her. "The only assumption I'm making is that a nurse, especially one from this kind of institution, wouldn't comprehend the complexities of advanced surgical diagnostics. Stick to bandages and vital signs, nurse. Leave the real medicine to doctors." He turned completely away from the patient, confident in his dismissal. At that moment, the patient's heart rate monitor flatlined, a long, piercing tone filling the bay. Kaelen's hands clenched at her sides, a quiet fury finally burning through her composure. Thorne had sealed his fate. The patient's heart rate monitor flatlined with an unnerving, drawn-out beep. Mr. Silas Green's chest rose and fell shallowly, his skin turning a pallid gray. The air in Trauma Bay 3, already thick with tension, solidified into a desperate silence. Dr. Thorne, still reeling from his own dismissive pronouncements, seemed paralyzed by the sudden, undeniable decline. But Nurse Kaelen Reed moved. She stepped forward, her posture straightening, a subtle but profound shift in her presence. Her voice, though still calm, took on an edge of command that cut through the sterile quiet. "Dr. Thorne," she stated, her gaze unwavering, "this patient is going into cardiogenic shock. We have seconds, not minutes. If you do not initiate the specific protocol I outlined, he will not survive." Thorne merely waved a dismissive hand, still stubbornly clinging to his fading authority. "Nurse, I've heard enough. I am the physician of record here." "No, doctor," Kaelen replied, her voice now crisp, each word delivered with military precision. "You are not." With a fluid, deliberate motion, Kaelen reached into the pocket of her scrubs, pulling out not a hospital ID, but a small, heavy, metal badge. It was an Army Combat Medic badge, its silver gleam catching the harsh fluorescent lights, framed by a wreath of oak and laurel, and adorned with 3 bronze stars, denoting multiple deployments and valorous service. She held it up, not defiantly, but with a quiet, unshakable authority. "I am Sergeant First Class Kaelen Reed, retired Army Combat Medic, decorated for distinguished service in 3 combat zones, with over 15 years of advanced trauma experience. I have more field surgical hours than most surgeons see in a lifetime, and I am telling you, this patient is crashing, and your current course of action is killing him." Thorne's jaw dropped, the clipboard in his hand clattering to the floor, echoing the sudden, deafening silence in the bay. Dr. Evelyn Hayes, observing from the doorway, offered a faint, knowing nod. Dr. Miller and Nurse Ben stared, their faces a mixture of awe and shock. Thorne's face, moments ago flushed with arrogance, drained of color, cycling through shades of confusion, disbelief, and outright horror. That's impossible," he stammered, his voice thin and reedy, a stark contrast to his earlier booming pronouncements. He gestured weakly at her scrubs. "You're a nurse. You're wearing scrubs. This is a trick." Kaelen held the badge steady, her eyes locked onto Thorne's, a quiet fire burning within them. "There is no trick, doctor. The uniform I choose to wear here, or the color of my skin, does not negate a lifetime of life-saving experience." My credentials are a matter of public record. And right now, the only thing that matters is Mr. Green's life, which you are actively endangering." Thorne's hands began to tremble, his entire worldview shattering around him. He couldn't reconcile the unassuming nurse with the decorated war hero standing before him. Before Thorne could articulate another sputtering protest, Dr. Evelyn Hayes stepped fully into Trauma Bay 3, her presence radiating a calm, unyielding authority. She walked directly to Kaelen's side, a silent but powerful show of support. "Dr. Thorne," Hayes stated, her voice firm and clear, addressing him directly. "Sergeant First Class Reed's service record and medical expertise are indeed impeccable. Her trauma experience, particularly in high-stakes, rapidly deteriorating situations like this, is unparalleled within this hospital, and frankly, in most civilian institutions. Her diagnosis of Mr. Green's atypical presentation is not only plausible but, given his current vitals, demonstrably accurate. You would do well to listen." Thorne visibly flinched, shrinking under the combined gazes of Kaelen and the chief of medicine. He was cornered, his arrogance now exposed as dangerous ignorance. Without waiting for Thorne to respond, Kaelen pivoted, her focus snapping back to the patient. Her voice was no longer calm, but a commanding bark, honed by years of battlefield emergencies. "Miller, push 2 milligrams atropine IV stat. Ben, get a crash cart now. Prepare for immediate intubation." Dr. Miller and Nurse Ben, galvanized by Kaelen's sudden, undeniable authority, sprang into action without a moment's hesitation. Their movements were swift, efficient, a stark contrast to Thorne's frozen, stunned posture. Kaelen's hands were already working, assessing, stabilizing, her eyes scanning the monitors with an intensity that missed nothing. The team, for the first time in minutes, moved in perfect, synchronized rhythm, a well-oiled machine finally under the command of its true leader. A life hung by a thread, and Kaelen Reed was pulling it back. "Thorne!" Kaelen barked, not even looking at him, her attention fixed on the patient. "You're closest to the airway cart. Get me the size 8.0 endotracheal tube and laryngoscope now." Thorne, still pale and disoriented, hesitated for a fraction of a second. He glanced at Dr. Hayes, who gave him a stern, unblinking look. Swallowing hard, he moved, his steps clumsy, his usual confident stride replaced by a hesitant shuffle. He fumbled with the cart, his hands, usually so precise in surgery, now shaking slightly. His movements lacked the practiced ease of the team around him, a stark symbol of his shattered confidence. He handed Kaelen the equipment, his eyes avoiding hers, muttering a barely audible, "Here, Nurse Reed." The once proud surgeon was reduced to a hesitant assistant, following orders from the doors he had so arrogantly dismissed. Under Kaelen's swift, decisive actions, the chaos in Trauma Bay 3 slowly began to recede. The flatlining beep gave way to a steady, rhythmic pulse on the monitor. Mr. Silas Green's shallow breathing deepened, and a faint, healthier color began to return to his face. Dr. Miller gasped, a sound of profound relief escaping her lips. "His vitals are stabilizing, Sergeant Reed. The atropine worked." Ben let out a quiet sigh, wiping sweat from his brow. Kaelen, her own face glistening with exertion, offered a small, tired smile. "Good work, team. We're not out of the woods yet, but he's fighting." The immediate danger had passed, thanks to the quiet expertise and unwavering resolve of a woman whose true capabilities had been almost fatally overlooked. Her expertise had saved him. But the story of justice and reckoning was far from over. The frenetic energy of Trauma Bay 3 had subsided, leaving behind the quiet hum of equipment and the lingering scent of antiseptic. Mr. Silas Green was stable, transferred to ICU, his life secured by a thread of insight and unwavering resolve. Kaelen Reed leaned against a counter, her posture still radiating calm, though the tension of the last hour had etched faint lines around her eyes. Dr. Lena Miller and Nurse Ben Carter stood before her, their faces a mix of exhaustion and profound awe. Vitals were stable on transfer. "Respiratory support is adequate," Kaelen stated, her voice returning to its usual composed, professional cadence. "Dr. Miller, ensure the full diagnostic workup for acute aortic dissection is prioritized." Ben, document everything, especially the initial presentation and the time to intervention. Ben nodded, still slightly stunned. Nurse Reed. Kaelen. That was incredible. You saw it when no one else did. Dr. Miller, usually reserved, added, You saved his life. I don't know what to say. Kaelen offered a small, reassuring smile. We all did our part. But the patient comes first. Always. From the doorway, Dr. Evelyn Hayes observed the exchange. A thoughtful, determined expression on her face. The dust had settled, but the truth of what had transpired remained, stark and undeniable. Dr. Evelyn Hayes returned to her office, the sterile quiet a stark contrast to the ER's recent chaos. She sat at her polished mahogany desk, not turning on the overhead lights, preferring the muted glow from the city outside. Her fingers moved with purpose, activating her computer, pulling up the incident report template. Thorne's dismissive arrogance, his prejudiced assumptions, the blatant disregard for patient welfare. It all scrolled through her mind, not as isolated events, but as a systemic failure of professional conduct. Hayes began to type, her notes precise and unforgiving. She detailed Thorne's condescending tone, his refusal to listen, his explicit remarks about hierarchy and knowing one's place. She referenced hospital policy, the code of conduct, and the paramount importance of collaborative care. This wasn't just about an insubordinate nurse. It was about a celebrated surgeon who had allowed his ego to jeopardize a life, who had dismissed expertise based on a uniform and a prejudice. Justice wasn't merely a concept within these walls, it was a mandate. Dr. Hayes knew, with resolute clarity, that this incident would not be swept under the rug. Meanwhile, in the sterile temporary office assigned to him, Dr. Elias Thorne was far from composed. His immaculate white coat lay crumpled on a chair, his face slick with a cold sweat. He paced, foam pressed to his ear, his voice a frantic, hushed whisper. No, you don't understand. She had a asterisk badge, a decorated combat medic badge. How was I supposed to know? She was wearing scrubs. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, the reality of his blunder crashing down with bone-jarring force. He tried to spin the narrative, to downplay his remarks, to paint Kaelen as an overzealous nurse who had misled him. But the words felt hollow, even to his own ears. He'd seen the look on Dr. Hayes' face, the quiet conviction of Nurse Reed, the shocked expressions of the junior staff. This wasn't a minor incident. This was a career-defining catastrophe. His reputation, meticulously built over decades, was now hanging by the thinnest of threads, unraveling with every desperate, unconvincing phone call. The arrogant surgeon, once so sure of his dominion, now faced the terrifying prospect of professional ruin. The hospital boardroom, usually a place for strategic planning and budget reviews, became a tribunal. Dr. Evelyn Hayes sat at the head of the polished table, her demeanor calm but unyielding. Across from her, Dr. Elias Thorne, dressed impeccably but looking pale and drawn, fidgeted in his seat. The HR director and the hospital administrator flanked Hayes, their expressions stern. Dr. Thorne, Hayes began, her voice measured, we are here to review the incident concerning patient Silas Green, which occurred earlier today in Trauma Bay 3. She proceeded to lay out the facts, presenting the detailed incident report she had compiled, quoting Thorne's dismissive remarks, and highlighting the critical delay in patient care. Thorne attempted to interrupt, to offer feeble excuses about stress and miscommunication, but his words lacked conviction. I merely sought to maintain proper procedure, he stammered. Nurses, after all, have a role to play, but diagnosis. The HR director cut him off, her gaze sharp. Dr. Thorne, are you suggesting that medical concerns should be ignored, based on the uniform of the person raising them? The weight of Thorne's actions grew heavier as the eyewitnesses were called. Nurse Ben Carter, usually deferential, spoke with quiet conviction, recounting Thorne's public scolding of Kaelen, his dismissive tone, and the explicit instruction for Kaelen to remember her place. Dr. Lena Miller, initially nervous, gained strength as she described Thorne's superficial assessment of Mr. Green and his outright rejection of Kaelen's urgent, accurate diagnosis. Each testimony was a nail in Thorne's professional coffin. His face, already pale, visibly fell with every corroborating detail. He stared at the polished table, unable to meet the eyes of his colleagues, or even the HR director. The evidence was irrefutable, his behavior indefensible. The intellectual arrogance he had wielded as a weapon now stood as a testament to his profound misjudgment. There was no spinning this, no amount of celebrity that could shield him from the stark reality of his prejudiced conduct. The room pulsed with a somber vindication. Dr. Hayes closed the file with a decisive snap, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent boardroom. "Dr. Thorne," she announced, her voice firm and without tremor. "The hospital's executive committee, in consultation with human resources, has reached a verdict." Thorne braced himself, his jaw tight. "Effective immediately, you are suspended without pay for a period of 2 weeks. Furthermore, you will be required to complete a comprehensive sensitivity training course and professional development modules focused on collaborative care and respectful communication." The hospital administrator added, "Any future incidents of this nature, Dr. Thorne, will result in immediate termination of your visiting privileges and a formal report to the state medical board." Thorne could only nod. A barely perceptible dip of his head, he rose awkwardly, gathered his pristine white coat, now seeming to mock his former self, and walked out, his usual confident stride replaced by a shuffling gait. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing his fate. The arrogance that had jeopardized a life had been met with intellectual justice. Days later, a subtle shift had settled over St. Jude's ER. The fluorescent lights still hummed, the monitors still beeped, but the undercurrent of tension that once permeated the air had eased, replaced by a quiet hum of respect. As Nurse Kaelen Reed moved through the bustling department, familiar faces now met her with a deference that hadn't been there before. Younger nurses offered nods. Doctors paused their charting to greet her, and even the harried residents seemed to hold her gaze a moment longer. At the nurse's station, Ben Carter watched her with open admiration. "She just knew," he murmured to Dr. Lena Miller. Lena nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "She absolutely did, and she wasn't afraid to fight for it." Kaelen, ever humble, simply smiled faintly, her focus unwavering on the next patient. In the quiet solitude of Mr. Silas Green's recovery room, Kaelen found the true reward of her unwavering conviction. A delicate flower arrangement sat on the bedside table, a splash of color against the sterile white. Mr. Green, though still pale, was sitting up, a warmth returning to his eyes. His wife sat beside him, holding his hand. When Kaelen entered, their faces lit up. "Nurse Reed," Mr. Green whispered, his voice still weak but filled with emotion. "They told me what you did, how you fought for me." His wife reached out, grasping Kalen's hand, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you, doctor. You saw something no one else did. You saved his life." Kaelen squeezed her hand gently. "That's what we're all here for, ma'am. He's a fighter, and he's in good hands now." Weeks later, Dr. Elias Thorne returned to St. Jude's, but it was not the same man who had swept through the ER with an air of untouchable arrogance. His pristine white coat seemed to hang a little heavier, his shoulders a little slumped. The swagger was gone, replaced by a noticeable caution, a subdued demeanor that spoke volumes. He moved with a newfound quietness, his eyes flicking nervously around the room. During a quiet moment near the supply closet, he found Kaelen. "Nurse Reed," he began, his voice stiff, barely audible. I wanted to apologize. My conduct was unacceptable. My assumptions were unprofessional." Kaelen met his gaze, her expression unreadable, but calm. "Accepted, Dr. Thorne," she replied, her voice firm, professional. Dr. Lena Miller, passing by, exchanged a quick, knowing glance with Kaelen. The apology was offered, but the deep-seated lessons were still unfolding. The incident became a pivotal moment for St. Jude's. In the hospital boardroom, Dr. Evelyn Hayes stood at the head of the polished table leading a meeting on new hospital-wide policies. A bright, new poster proclaiming "Respect and Collaboration, Every Voice Matters" hung behind her. This institution thrives on the collective expertise of its entire staff, Dr. Hayes stated, her voice resonating with principled clarity. The recent incident, while regrettable, served as a stark reminder that hierarchy must never supersede valid medical insight, regardless of where it originates. We are implementing new training, new communication protocols, to ensure every member of our team feels empowered to speak up, and every voice is heard. The hospital administrator nodded in agreement. Patient care, above all else, demands our humility and our open minds. Late one night in the ER, as the city outside slept, Kaelen shared a quiet moment with Nurse Jessica Chen. Jessica, a new hire, looked at Kaelen with wide, earnest eyes. "How do you always stay so calm, Kaelen, even when everything is chaos?" Kaelen smiled, a faint, knowing light in her eyes. "Chaos is just another environment, Jessica. The important thing is to keep your head, keep your focus, and never forget why you're here." Good ideas, true insight, they don't care about titles or what uniform you're wearing. They care about the patient. Listen to everyone, especially the quiet ones. Because sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from the most unexpected places. Jessica nodded, absorbing Kaelen's words, the familiar hum of the ER a backdrop to this shared moment of enduring wisdom. In a world that too often judges by the superficial, by the color of skin, the cut of a uniform, or the shine of a title, Kaelen Reed's story stands as a powerful testament. It's a reminder that true expertise isn't always emblazoned on a name tag or announced with a flourish. It can reside in the quiet confidence of a nurse, in the deep-seated knowledge of a combat medic, in the unwavering gaze of someone who has seen the raw edges of life and death. The real measure of a professional, and indeed of a person, is not the assumptions others make about them, but the unwavering commitment they show to their craft, their patience, and their inherent humanity. Sometimes, the person you're dismissing might just be the most qualified, most experienced, and most capable individual in the room. The story of Nurse Kaelen Reed and Dr. Elias Thorne goes far beyond the walls of St. Jude's. It's a powerful reminder that true expertise and wisdom aren't defined by a title, a uniform, or the color of one's skin. They are forged in experience, honed by dedication, and revealed through an unwavering commitment to what is right. In a world too often quick to judge, to dismiss, and to categorize based on superficialities, Kaelen's quiet strength stood as a beacon. She challenged not just a single arrogant surgeon, but the insidious assumptions that permeate our society, assumptions that can cost lives, stifle innovation, and erode fundamental respect. Her story champions the intellectual power of discernment over prejudice, affirming that the ability to truly see, truly listen, and truly understand is the most potent weapon against injustice. This is not merely a tale of professional vindication. It is a call to recognize the profound value in every individual, regardless of their perceived place in any hierarchy. The next time someone tries to put you in a box based on how you look, where you come from, or what they think they know about you, remember Nurse Kaelen Reed. Remember the quiet power of her conviction and the undeniable force of her expertise. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for what's right. And never let anyone's prejudices prevent you from doing your job or speaking your truth. It's because you never know who you're really talking to. And more importantly, everyone deserves to be heard, regardless of who they are. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked, or your assumed position? Has your expertise ever been dismissed by someone who thought they knew better? Share your story below in the comments. Your voice matters, and your experiences can inspire others to challenge the status quo. If you enjoyed this story of intellectual justice served and assumptions shattered, make sure to subscribe for more incredible true stories of resilience, wisdom, and empowerment. Don't miss another chapter in the ongoing fight for respect and recognition.